Welcome to the Tombstone Kings of Queens. Due to adult language and violent nature of the stories told, listener discretion is strongly advised.
Episode 2, Graveyard Shift.
About 2 days go by since the Amy resolution. Leslie calls me to his house for what he calls a team-building exercise. While I'm shaving that morning, I get so mad that the general turns on the death sight without me noting. First I jump back cause I thought I just slit my own throat, but since the blood is dried, transparent, and floats in the air around my neck like crimson bubbles, I have to take a deep breath. The general, you see, lets me see how corpses got that way. Sometimes how close someone is to death itself. Last thing I need is a reminder of how I died first thing in the morning while I'm holding a straight razor. I trace the phantasmal chunk out of my neck, the long, deep claw marks that run across my chest and shoulders. It's a grim reminder to how this relationship got started. I see the bruise blossom across the entire left side of my head. I exhale slow, and the mirage vanishes. Fucking Tuesdays. Team building exercise is Leslie's word for screaming at Callie and I for fighting in public while using our powers. Seems some dipshit called the cops after I got up and picked the moped off me, and Leslie had to bribe our contact at the Queen's Precinct to nip the investigation in the bud. I'm the first to admit it was sloppy. Princess Pura, she just seconds the notion. She sits on the other side of the living room, legs crossed, her hands crammed into her hoodie halfway to the elbow, stares off into a corner with pursed lips. Leslie folds his arms until we mutter our fake apologies. Then Callie excuses herself without Leslie's permission. Fine by me. We're not the kind of people that solve our problems with words. At least she and I ain't. To be 19 is one thing, but to be 19 with her kind of powers, that's gotta be infuriating. Like having a pack of wolves tied to a sled and still needing to obey traffic laws. That went fabulously, I say. It takes about a minute for Leslie to thaw out and talk to me again. He rummages through some drawers in that massive oak desk, the one he claims is from the early 1900s Ireland. He hands me a memento, a purple heart with a greasy thumbprint over the ribbon. "Take this and whatever else you want," he says. "We've got a case tonight." I want to mention that I don't have time for a field trip. I want to get started on hunting down Amy's killer. Only thing I say is, what about the rest of the crew? "I'm giving them the night off," he says. "Nix is arranging a girls' night out." I have to laugh. Well, snort, really. The image is just too much. There's Carrie, Nix Nicholson, a high-end real estate agent and recovering alcoholic and sex addict. Chandra, a voodoo-worshipping Katrina survivor with a concealed pair of butterfly knives, and fucking Princess Pura, all sitting at a bar, playing who can make the bartender least comfortable. All the while behind them, their geists either goad them into sleeping with him, strangling him, or setting him and the whole place on fire. Then I should go with them, I say. Keep a proper eye on Nix. "No, I'm not having you two fuck on a work night." Last time wasn't even my idea. "You know her geist can manipulate your thoughts and emotions, right?" Seems redundant, given her people skills and that ass. "The two of us will be more than enough," Leslie dismisses. "Just some minor haunting in Midtown." He's quick to change the subject and get back to giving me grief. "You need to keep up with the Twilight Network, Robbie. Read the signs, translate the graffiti, or at least look at the Craigslist section once in a while. Because in a little bit, I'm gonna need you to find your own work." "The hell's that mean?" I ask him. "It means we have something very big coming up, very soon. And anything happens to one of us, if anything happens to one of us, I want the crew to know and respect the chain of command. First and hardest thing about moving from South Carolina to New York City was all the people. Constant, like a quicksand of faces and shapes and earbuds and spitting. We're all these blood cells pumping ourselves through the concrete arteries and veins of this city, sometimes being filtered out, sometimes breaking, sometimes looking for outside invaders. But in a city made of immigrants and out-of-towners, even the diversity of faces blends into one technicolor clump of humanity. Queens is one of the most diverse cities on the planet, given its population and density. That was an adjustment too. Every other white guy I talk to has the accent of a James Bond villain, if they speak English at all. I was overwhelmed, and I hated taking the subway my first 2 months up north. After I became a sin eater, the general opened my eyes and made everything worse. Sometimes I'll get that stab behind my eyes as he shows me a new ghost stuck to the front of a passing train, either a lingering suicide or someone shoved off the tracks. Looking around, the clutter and the noise overtakes me. I see people's inside rottenness on the outside. A bulbous brown tumor over a woman's shirt warns of the cancer in her lungs. The elderly look even more sunken beneath their cosmetic lie of flesh. New York is all about illusions. 110 miles of subway underground, almost half of that decommissioned but still inhabited. However big those skyscrapers are, there's just so much space under the streets, and you'll never see an inch of it unless you work maintenance, catering, or security. Even us of the bound, when we die and we come back, we're just on borrowed time. Obsessed as we might be with the dead, it's the living that I try to protect, that I want to help. It's amazing what we slow through every day when there's so many of us in such a small space. Ultraviolet laser beams from the sun, clouds of Wi-Fi and data, quagmires of lingering death energy, tiny vaporized clouds of asbestos, lead paint fumes, greasy carbon exhaust, and human shit. It's amazing. All of it's amazing. Everything we wade through. When I get the chance to do some light reading, I learn that every culture has a different answer to the obvious question. Where do we go when we die? The Greeks told stories of wise, cannibalistic ghosts who'd share their knowledge for blood. The guys in Egypt? Shit, I lost track once I got to the dog-headed guy with the scales, got the feather and the stone, or maybe the stone is your sins, maybe your sin is the feather, who knows. The Vikings were pretty damn sure that you'd still be yourself, in your prime, fighting and slashing for all you're worth, only to get up back and revel in the heat of battle forever. The Bible, oh shit, that one's the most vague of them all for somehow. Only book I've ever gotten a physical copy of, and I have no idea what heaven looks like from that thing. Places of wrath, salvation, punishment, fire, ice, pleasure, pain, animals, skies, tunnels. Some sin eaters I've met, they come to the job with so much sci-fi and fantasy novel under their belt, you realize there are just as many versions of the underworld as there are people themselves. Sometimes there's a culturally accepted vision of hell, when sometimes you get your own planet full of Mormons. Sometimes it's as personal as the guy who died. Christians with near-death experiences, they'll see saints hovering in the white light, while a Hindu in the same position will see Hindu gods and bodhisattvas. Both are wrong, by the way. It's not a matter of where we go when we die, but where we go when we live. When a crew is formed, it's up to us to collectively decide, where do we go when we die? Leslie and Nix have talked about the journey to the ultimate down under, and I made the mistake of once asking Leslie which story is the right one. After all, He's been there a dozen times. He just sucked in air through his teeth and said, very carefully, as if he were chiseling each word into a headstone, all of them. I'm amazed when Leslie brings me to my old employee, 524 8th Avenue. Giant stone reliefs on the outside of the building and 42 stories topped with pollution-stained granite. Just like I remember it. Perfect place you'd expect to see Batman silhouetted above. We go through my old delivery entrance, show some ID and sign in. I can feel Leslie watching me, waiting for any sign of discomfort. This isn't just where I used to work. This is where I died. We take the freight elevator to the basement. To make it perfect, the lights flicker the moment we step out. Linoleum tiles on a ramp leading down a hallway of supply closets and scuffed up walls. Concrete soffits and wired cages blocking off piles of black garbage bags. Just like I remember it. Leslie takes the lead. "Hold my hand," he says, reaching back. "The angel will direct us." I take his hand, and I hear empty glass clinking like wind chimes as Leslie's Geist, the pale angel, opens its wings of syringes and activates the boneyard. It hovers above him, its head like a dried gray squash with 3 identical hollow circles forming its mouth and eyes. Twists and spasms in every direction, peering through walls, through the floor, through the ceiling. Jaunty. It's weird to watch. As it flaps its wings, I get a better sense of the area. This isn't a simple haunting. The lingering death stain indicates at least 5 people died here. And really recent. Leslie Sherman was a lifelong scholar and an associate LGBT studies professor at NYU through the 1980s. That put him on the front lines of the AIDS crisis. For years, he watched friends, lovers, and his own husband decay in real time. According to him, the world lost a generation of artists and scientists alike. I only heard about it as the fag virus back home. Some modern ghost story with no origin or way to fight it. In 1984, Leslie found himself getting lightheaded and short of breath. He had no white blood cells in his system, and the doctors gave him weeks. He lasted 4 years, pumping every cent of his trust fund into research. December of 1989, he died in Mount Sinai, barely 92 pounds. It was then that the pale angel hovered above him, came to him like in a fevered dream, speaking to him in dried whispers like something out of a Tony Kushner play. It made the bargain, and Leslie accepted. Leslie Sherman became the first person in history to suffer a complete and total recovery from HIV. First person to suffer the swarm of media attention, garner a temporary flash of fame, and suffer a lifetime of fundraising and public speaking afterward. Suffer alone. The collective voices of the stricken dead holding his hand and shoulders, always pleading for the use of his voice, always pleading for his attention, always pleading to be heard, pleading to curse, to say goodbye to loved ones. Since his rebirth as a sin eater, he's become a pillar in our community, founding the first incarnation of the Tombstone Kings and turning his academic pursuits to the occult. I've heard him called one of the city's most prominent necromancers. Probably true. He's seen the underworld. He's brought back artifacts from the underworld. He's even traveled the world. And hell, he's just as restless as the zombies he's tried to animate. I genuinely don't think he can feel fear. It wasn't until after I met him that I learned strength ain't just a number on a bench press. Sometimes it's strength of spirit or conviction. He earned my respect the day we met. With the Pale Angel's help, Leslie hides us from plain sight. Even any ghost that's lingering in the basement won't be able to see us. We enter Twilight together, and some of the larger boxes and loose piping become transparent against a backdrop of grays and faint reds and purples. Leslie holds his keystone, a bloodied handkerchief, his covenant with the Pale Angel, over his mouth and nose. He concentrates, then his eyes shoot open wide. "It's near," he says, "and it's weak, maybe less than a year dead." Then maybe it didn't cause this huge death stain we're feeling. "Get out your saber, Robbie. Right hallway, 30 paces. Like he has to tell me. I pull out the polished, ornate grip and guard of a saber that survived the Civil War. My covenant with the General. In Twilight, the General's saber grows a blade of faint ghost light. I run down the hall, shedding ectoplasm over my chest like a breastplate. Whatever I encounter, weak though it may be, I want to be ready, sword and shield. I turn the corner and make it halfway down the hall when I spot the ghost. He's mid-40s, black guy, bald up top, wearing a porter's jumpsuit, slapping his whole hand against the panel of a snack dispenser. I stop in mid-charge when he turns and addresses me directly.
"Robbie? Is that you? I haven't seen you for months."
Oh my God. Lewis! It's then I see, in the ghost sight, how Lewis died. Massive chunks of flesh taken out of his neck, scratches over his face, through his arms and shoulder, right side of his head caved in. Shit, practically the same injuries I had the night. Leslie comes down the hall slowly behind me. "Do you know this man?" Leslie asks. Lewis keeps talking.
"I've been trying to switch my shifts with Marty because I'm already on 11 straight days, but Mr. Sills says we're so understaffed."
Lewis. God damn it, you're dead. Sometimes, after meeting one of us, the dead come to some pretty hard conclusions pretty fast. Sometimes it shocks them into lashing out. Sadly, Lewis does that too. His arm reaches out into the vending machine, and he swings the whole damn thing at me in one go. It shatters plastic and glass against the wall in the narrow hallway. Lewis starts screaming.
"I'm not dead. I can't be dead. Mr. Sills said I'd be safe. Mr. Sills promised I'd be safe in the shadows."
Leslie extends his power, slowing Lewis down. "Who the hell is Mr. Sills, Robbie?" "Never heard of him. Our boss was named Mr. Calloway. I'm sorry, Lewis, but I gotta put you down."
"How come you got to live and I had to die? You didn't help any of us, Robbie."
Lewis chokes out, doubling over in a strained effort against Leslie's will. I reach out and I touch his hand, and the General extends our blood over his arm, over his face, over his whole head. As the stigmata manifestation creeps around him and solidifies, Lewis begins fading away. "You rest in peace, friend," I say slowly. "Your suffering is done." Lewis is gone after that. The remains of his corpus form into a plastic card which clatters to the ground. Leslie nods and steps out of Twilight. "He passed peacefully. Very well done, Robbie." I pick up the key card. It has Lewis's face, home address, and a magnetic strip on the backside. It lingers with death energy. And I pocket it. You never know what the dead are going to leave behind, and you never know, even less, when it might be of some use to you down the line. "Still, this doesn't add up," Leslie says. "We both felt that death stain by the elevator, and the angel concludes it's less than a decade old." "I told you there's no way Lewis caused any of that. He's just a bystander," I say, "because Lewis died the same night I did, little over a year ago. Whatever's down here, it's happened more than once." "We should discuss this back at my place, Robbie." So that was it. Guy's night out. Laid a coworker to rest. Using Lewis's memento, I went to his house to check in on his widow. One of these days I'll ask where he's buried so I can leave a flower. Say a last word. Not a bad day's work. That don't mean I'm satisfied, though. I just found 5:15 written through the steam on my bathroom mirror. Which means there are gaps in my memory. Some recent, some old. And there's one person who I can ask. Someone who's been riding shotgun on my soul for the last year. I think it's about time that I sit down and have a long heart-to-heart with the General himself.
The Tombstone Kings of Queens is written by Uncle Yo, produced by Jimmy Lin and Uncle Yo.
And don't forget, original music produced by Jimmy Lin.
Special thanks to Onyx Path Publishing and White Wolf Publishing for the chance to haunt a whole new world of darkness. Comments? Questions? Suggestions? Join us on facebook.com/UncleYo or check us out on patreon.com/UncleYo and help keep the Twilight Network in touch. Game on, include everybody, and remember that death is only the beginning.